All right, so are you ready to dive into the world of investment banking? We're kind of cracking open some fascinating source material today, almost like getting a behind-the-scenes peek at this career path of a Wall Street insider.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever wondered what it really takes to climb that ladder from, the ground floor all the way to those corner offices, the executive suites?
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're going to unpack.
And what we often find is that the investment banking world, it draws a lot of comparisons to the military, actually.
Really?
Yeah. When it comes to the structure, there's a very deliberate hierarchy.
Okay, so think less Wolf of Wall Street and more, structured ranks and a very clear path to the top.
Exactly. Our source lays it out pretty clearly. You start as an analyst, fresh out of university. Then you climb those ranks, associate, vice president, senior vice president, and then finally the ever-elusive managing director.
A real corporate ladder to climb there, rung by rung. But here's something that jumped out at me. Our source mentions this alternative hierarchy at some banks, particularly those outside the U.S. and U.K.
Interesting.
Analyst, associate director, director, executive director, and then managing director at the very top. What's the story there?
It's an intriguing detail, and while our source doesn't dive into the specifics of why this difference exists, it does suggest that even within, the highly structured world of investment banking, there are variations in culture and organization. Perhaps a slightly flatter structure reflects a different approach to decision-making, or maybe it's a cultural nuance in how these organizations value seniority versus expertise.
Interesting.
It definitely raises more questions for us to explore.
Yeah, it's almost like there are different dialects of Wall Street.
Right.
You think one structure is more common in certain global financial hubs because of how those markets developed.
That's a fascinating thought. And it highlights that even though we're talking about, a global industry, the influence of those local practices and historical context, it can still be felt.
So regardless of the specific titles, what's the underlying reason for this hierarchical structure in investment banking?
At its core, it's about managing really the immense pressure that comes with this territory. Investment banking is notorious for demanding clients, tight deadlines, and really high stakes.
Right, absolutely.
This hierarchy, it creates a very clear system of accountability, outlining career progression and ensuring that work gets done efficiently, even under that intense pressure.
Okay, so we've talked about this structured hierarchy, but let's get real. What's it actually like for those starting out in the investment banking trenches? Our source dives into the day-to-day reality of analysts and associates, and let me tell you, it's not all champagne and caviar.
It's definitely a trial by fire, especially in those first few years.
Right.
Long hours and a relentless workload are pretty much par for the course, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Our source actually uses the term Excel monkeys to describe analysts. Chained to their desks, crunching numbers day and night. It's almost comical. But I imagine it rings true for a lot of people in those entry-level roles. You're fresh out of a top university, maybe even top of your class, and suddenly you're hit with this tidal wave of spreadsheets and deadlines.
It's a baptism by fire, that's for sure. And that's exactly why our source emphasizes the importance of attitude above all else, even more so than, technical skills.
Right.
It's that eagerness to learn, that resilience, that can-do spirit that truly sets apart a successful analyst.
Which honestly is a good lesson for anyone, regardless of their career path, right?
Absolutely.
That whole roll up your sleeves and dive in mentality can take you pretty far.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that next step up the ladder, the associate role. How does that transition typically play out?
Well, you'll often see MBAs from prestigious programs, entering at the associate level, although some analysts do rise through the ranks as well. And this is where the skill set really starts to shift, I think. It's less about being a spreadsheet wizard yourself and more about managing those wizards, right? Coordinating their efforts and ensuring smooth operation.
Delegation, communication, bridging the gap between those senior bankers and the analysts on the ground. Sounds like a whole different ballgame.
It is.
But hold on. Our source throws in a real curveball here. Apparently, in equity research, the hierarchy is flipped. You start as an associate and then become an analyst.
Oh.
Now that has me scratching my head. Any insights into why that might be?
It's certainly an anomaly, and unfortunately our source doesn't delve into the specific reasons behind this reversal. But it does highlight that even within this structured world of investment banking, there are these variations and nuances.
Yeah.
Perhaps it has something to do with the nature of equity research itself, the emphasis on analysis and reporting rather than deal making.
Right.
Or maybe it's a way to attract experienced professionals who might not want to start at the very bottom rung of the ladder.
It makes you wonder if the type of work, the client base, or even the historical evolution of a particular area within investment banking could influence those hierarchical structures.
Right.
Fascinating stuff. But let's get back to those associates for a second. Our source mentioned some interesting conflicts that emerge at this level.
Yeah.
What's the dynamic there?
Well, what the firm values in an associate, that ability to, manage up, anticipate needs, ensure smooth operations,
Right.
isn't always what analysts appreciate most in a supervisor. Think about it. From an analyst perspective, a good associate isn't just someone who delegates effectively, but someone who also mentors, who guides, who doesn't just pile on more work, but actually invests in their development.
It's that classic tension between what's good for the organization versus what's good for the individual's growth, isn't it? I imagine that plays out in a lot of industries, not just finance.
Right.
But I have to say, this image of the associate demanding perfection from the analyst, telling them to triple check their work and not come back until it's flawless. It's almost a cliche at this point. But behind that cliche, there's this undercurrent of pressure, right? Of those incredibly high stakes that come with every decision, every number on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. One small error can have a ripple effect, impacting clients, deals, and ultimately the firm's reputation. So that attention to detail, that precision, it's not just about being a stickler for rules, it's about understanding the weight of responsibility that comes with this territory. And that's where the role of a good associate, someone who can balance those demands with a bit of empathy and guidance, becomes absolutely crucial.
All right, we've explored the trenches of the analyst and associate world, but let's be honest, there's something about those upper rungs of the ladder that always piques the curiosity.
It's alluring, isn't it?
It is. What's it like to reach the level of VP or even managing director?
Think of it as a shift in perspective. As you climb those ranks, it becomes less about that, day-to-day execution and more about strategy, leadership, and really seeing that big picture.
Our source describes the VP as, like, the linchpin of the deal team. Someone who manages those client expectations, keeps the managing director informed, and makes sure that the analysts and associates, they're all on track.
Right, keeping everyone in line.
That's a lot of spinning plates. It almost makes you wonder if project management should be the top of the resume for aspiring investment bankers.
You're not wrong. A good VP needs exceptional project management skills. Think about it. They're juggling multiple stakeholders, anticipating potential roadblocks, and keeping everything moving forward, often under, pretty intense pressure.
Right.
And those skills are invaluable, not just in finance, but really in any field where you have complex projects and tight deadlines are just the norm.
It makes you realize that a lot of the skills you hone in investment banking, that attention to detail, problem solving, communication, they're transferable to so many different careers. But okay, let's talk about those at the very top. The managing directors.
Okay.
Our source paints them as the rainmakers, the ones responsible for securing those multi-million-dollar deals and really nurturing those crucial client relationships.
Right. They're bringing in the big bucks.
They are.
But here's where it gets interesting. Our source hints at this potential conflict. What makes a good managing director from the firm's perspective isn't always aligned with what makes a good leader from the team's perspective.
Okay, so the firm wants someone who brings in deals no matter what.
Exactly.
But the team working under that MD, it's about more than just the bottom line, right?
Precisely. A good managing director, at least from the team's perspective, is someone who is fair, a clear communicator, and someone who genuinely invests in their team's development rather than just seeing them as a means to an end.
Right. It makes you wonder how those competing pressures, that drive for profit versus the need to build a healthy, sustainable team culture, how that plays out in the investment banking world. Our source talks about managing directors facing this constant pressure to deliver, this focus on short-term compensation rather than building those, deeper, more ethical client relationships.
It's a real dilemma, and it speaks to, I think, a broader question about values and priorities within the industry. If the focus is always on, the next deal, the next bonus, does that come at the expense of building trust, fostering mentorship, and creating, a work environment where people feel valued beyond their, immediate output?
Such an important point, it seems like. Finding that balance, that commitment to both performance and people is crucial for any leader in any industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to something our source highlighted throughout. The importance of the deal team.
Yes. The heart of investment banking.
It's that core unit. Analyst, associate, VP, and managing director, all working together towards this common goal. And what struck me is that our source really emphasizes the need for more than just individual brilliance within these deal teams.
Right.
It's about, teamwork, clear communication, and this shared understanding of the client's goals.
Absolutely. You could have the brightest minds in a room, but if they can't effectively collaborate, share information, and work towards a common vision, the whole thing just falls apart.
It makes you think about the importance of fostering those dynamics within any team, but especially in a high-pressure, hierarchical environment like investment banking. It begs the question, how do you cultivate true collaboration and respect when there's, such a clear power dynamic at play? Food for thought there for anyone navigating those waters.
It really is.
So we've journeyed through the ranks of investment banking today, from those, grueling analyst all-nighters to the high-stakes world of managing directors.
It's a wild ride.
We've uncovered the skills, the pressures, and, even some of the ethical dilemmas that kind of color this demanding yet undeniably fascinating field.
It's a world unto itself.
And as you continue to explore this world, whether you're considering a career in finance or prepping for an interview or even just diving in out of pure curiosity, keep this in mind. What kind of leader do you want to be? What values will guide your own climb? That's something I think worth reflecting on, no matter where your path leads.
Wise words to end on. Always remember that climb is just as important as the destination.
Perfectly said. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of investment banking.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us.